Welcome to Chapter 7. So, in Chapter 7, we're going to be talking about social thinking and social influence. You will probably recognize a great deal of the material in Chapter 7 because a lot of it is duplicated material from your social psychology course. So, if you are a psychology major, you have probably already taken your social psychology course or will soon. So, many of those areas I will go over very quickly because they are focused on a great deal in the social psychology course. But I will touch on them just so that that is well rounded. But understand that the reason I'm going through that really quickly is it's material that you've already had or will have, but likely already had. So in Chapter 7, we're talking about the social influence and how we make an impression of others. So when we see a situation, how do we interpret that situation how do we get our feelings and what do we think about it? What's going on for us? And there's a couple of things that we do. Number one, we look at the appearance of the people that we're dealing with. We look at their verbal behavior, the words that they say. We look at their actions. And we look at the nonverbal messages. This is going to be body language or things that they're doing. And finally, we look at the situation. Does it seem in line with the situation, not in line with the situation? And we look at all of that at once. And that's how we come up with a determination as to what is going on and how we feel about that. Do we feel threatened? Do we feel excited? Do we feel confused? What are our thoughts on that situation? Frequently, we go to snap decisions. And we don't want to blame ourselves for that. They're normal, and they're normal because there's just so much information coming at any given time, and we have to process it, and we have to do it very quickly. Imagine in traffic or so many situations, you just got to react quickly, and so sometimes we have to go back and rethink it and go, wait a minute, maybe I jumped to a conclusion there. I thought this person was a danger. The other day I saw somebody at the park with them little kids, and I thought, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And then I went over there and realized that it was nothing at all. But initially it got my attention just enough that I walked over to check it out. But I wasn't judging, I was just concerned. And that was the snap decision. And those are things that keep us safe. So that's okay. Because we're just too busy to go through everything. So we go through, our head is constantly processing things. So really, really quickly it goes through what seems out of line here, what seems off, what is not in making sense to me. And if something's off, that's when we're going to look at it a little bit more. And one of the things we look at in this chapter is how do we attribute behavior? Well, how do we decide if that behavior is alarming or concerning at all? And so what are the things we really pay attention to? Because there's so many things that are happening constantly, we don't mind them at all. We don't pay any attention to them. So we pay attention to something that's unexpected, something that's novel, something that doesn't seem right. In that particular case at the park, I had not seen that person with a child. And so all of a sudden he shows up, and there's no child attached to him, and ultimately the parent had sent a grandparent down to pick up the other kids. So it was a new face, and it didn't fit because why would that gentleman be at the park? It was unlikely that somebody in their 70s was there to play on the swings. So what is unexpected? What's happening? If a giant chicken walked into the room, you'd pay attention, because unless you're on a farm or that was normal for you, so that would be weird. When the events are relevant, they matter. There's a lot of things we just don't pay attention to because I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me. I don't have anything invested in it. If people are making noise over here or doing that over there, I don't have anything invested. I don't feel unsafe. I don't really care. But if I am invested, if it does matter, I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to it. Also, if we feel that we are suspicious about the other person's motives. So if we are suspect going into the situation, we're not comfortable, we want to really examine that situation and see what's going on. A couple of errors come up in those snap decisions. Again, they're common, and it's nothing wrong with them existing. Just if we overuse them or aren't aware of them, then they can affect our decisions in a way that we don't want them to. And one of those is called the fundamental attribution error. Basically, what happens here is we like to blame other people. They're all responsible for things that happened, especially if they're wrong. So if something happened, it was that person's fault. It was we don't really like to take the blame ourselves too much. But if somebody else does it, somebody else didn't care, somebody else wasn't careful, somebody else wasn't mindful, somebody else gave me bad service. We don't blame the situation, like they didn't have a choice or their computer broke down. Just earlier today, I waited on hold for 38 minutes just to be cut off. And my first thought is, why did they hang up on me? Now, maybe they did. I don't think so. We only got past high. I don't think I got them upset too much. But rather than blaming technology, I'm going to blame them. And that's frustrating, and it doesn't relieve my frustration. I still have to call back, only now I have to call back and I'm frustrated. So that's a fundamental attribution error. Defensive attribution is basically where we blame the victim. So when we see something that happens and we think it's unjust or unright, we say, but they deserved it. Somehow in my world, it has to make sense. And so the way I'm going to make it makes, and that's dissonance that goes into, again, social psychology. So if we see someone who's homeless, or we see someone, we say, well, they brought it on themselves. They're drinking, they didn't care about drinking, they brought it on themselves. And I'm not saying you do think that way, but it allows us to excuse certain things without having to look deeper at them. Another one is the confirmation bias, which is our tendency to seek information that supports our beliefs while not looking for information that doesn't. So not to get in a political battle or anything like that, or newsfeed, but if you haven't taken How You Know What We Know, good course to learn about this. But what happens here is we have beliefs on something, and if we are firmly held in our beliefs, we don't really want to change our mind. So we will select articles or friends or solicit feedback that is in line with what we think. And so when it's not in line with what we think, we just kind of skip over those because we don't really want to, we don't believe in it, we don't really want to look for, we don't seek it out. We don't seek out, and typically, somebody may be different, but we don't typically look for a reason why we're wrong. We look at somebody and says, I really like this president, or I really don't like this president. So I'm going to find evidence that supports me in my actions. And it's not hard to do. There's always two sides to so many stories. So whether it's insert problem here, whether it's drug use, whether it's gun control, whether it's Democrat or Republican, we often seek out that information that reinforces the beliefs that we came to the table with. And that's called confirmation bias. A self-fulfilling prophecy is in here too. This is a real important term. Again, this is coming out of social psych as well, but it basically means our expectations about a person cause them to behave in a way that confirms their expectations. So if you heard about somebody that they were just stupid and never had any good ideas, and you shouldn't even bother to waste their time, you might not invest in listening to their ideas. You might put them off, and when you do, kind of half listen. Where if you had heard that person was brilliant and just had so much to offer, you're going to be more invested in what they have to say. So a self-fulfilling prophecy is in line with that, and basically what it means is how they feel about themselves, they will seek that out too. So if they feel like they're stupid or useless or been told that, they won't try, they won't put the effort forth. Why should they bother? Not going to be taken seriously anyhow. So when we give negative messages to people, or when for whatever reason we come forward with a negative message, then that's what's going to happen. So you've probably heard people say, I'm going to fail this test, I'm going to fail this test, and somebody will say that's not the right attitude, because that gives you permission to do it, and it means you expect to do it. So when something gets hard, instead of figuring it out and knowing you're capable, you kind of quit and figured that was going to happen anyway. So that's a real important one, and it can hold us back a great deal. Things that affect our perception, one of them is cognitive distortions. So basically what these are going to be prejudices or biases that distort or affect how we view a situation. One of those things is groupings or categories. So we chunk things together in one category rather than taking the time to separate each and everything for what it is. And that happens because it has to happen sometimes. There's just so much information happening. Another would be in groups or out groups. So if they think similarly, I'm going to pay attention to their thoughts. And if they don't think similarly, they're from a different team, a different group, a different thought, I'm going to exclude that. So that happens sometimes. Stereotypes are in here. Again, this course is not going to go too much into them, but they're important to understand, and again, social psych will. But this is where we have a belief that's applied to every individual of a group. So all women do this, all Spanish people do that kind of grouping. And a prejudice is so stereotyping is just attaching something to it. It's not necessarily positive or negative, where a prejudice is when we have a negative attitude towards that. So all women do this and I don't like it, therefore it's always a negative. So we're attaching this negative thing to it, and we're going to treat them less than because they have this negative attached to them, or frequently we do. Modern discrimination looks a little bit different. This can be ignoring certain things, dismissing certain things. Nobody really likes to be labeled as prejudiced anymore. It's not cool. It's not, it's very taboo. And we don't like the label. So what we tend to do is just ignore situations or be more passive in our discrimination, but it's still there. We have these feelings, and so we're still going to treat people a little bit differently, and that does frequently happen. What causes prejudice? So why is it still here? Why do we still have this in our society? One of the things is we don't like things that are different. So we don't like if we've attached a thing to a whole group and that group is different than what we have, we're afraid of change or afraid of things that are, even if they're not a true threat, we just tend to not be comfortable with things that we see or we view as different, even if they're not that different. So somebody eats a different type of food, we all eat food. But we don't see it that way sometimes. We just look initially and go, wow, they eat different, dress different, talk different, whatever that is, and that's threatening to me. If they're saying words and I don't understand those words, they're threatening to me. They're not even talking to you, but because we don't understand it, we find it to be a threat sometimes. The other thing is our automatic thinking starts kicking in there, and it gets confused and it doesn't get clarity because it's not similar, and so that can create fear for us. In some cases, we have competition between those other groups, or we see it as competition for the same thing. So if somebody's on a different team, if you think about your politics, you have to be Republican or you have to be Democratic. I'd rather be like in the middle. Like, why do I have to pick? Because I like some of this and I like some of that. But that's not the way our society works. So oftentimes we have to pick, and the other group becomes the enemy, even if they had good ideas or some good ideas. Sometimes we feel that it's a threat to our social identity, that they're taking over a situation or they're going to rule out my ideas in the process, so that can be scary for us. So those are all valid reasons why it happens. And again, it's sort of an automatic process sometimes. We can control it, we can choose to look past it, but sometimes we do not. So we have to make a conscious decision to do so. So how do we reduce it? If we don't like it and we don't like the feeling about it, how do I get rid of it? A couple of things we can do. One, again, is to realize it's automatic thinking and choose to get rid of it. Just choose to go, well, that's a silly thought. That doesn't make any sense. Just because of that doesn't make it a threat to me, and I'm fine. And the more we do it, our automatic thought process changes, so we won't feel it threatening in the future or feel less threatened by it. The other thing is exposure and contact. We fear what we don't know. We fear what we don't understand. So the more we have contact with somebody, the more exposure we have, the less we realize, the more we realize we're the same, more the same than we are different, and the less there is to fear. So contact, deliberate contact, intergroup contact helps a great deal. I think I'm going to stop there. That's a good stopping point, because next we're going to go into the power of persuasion, and that's a little bit different subject. So come right back and we're going to talk about persuasion.